My name is Samantha Coleman, and I'm 32 years old. Last summer, my father abandoned my 80-year-old grandfather, a self-made tech billionaire with early dementia, at a remote cafe in rural Tuscany. He took his phone, wallet, and medication, then drove away. In our world of private jets and Manhattan penthouses, we'd seen plenty of moral bankruptcy, but this crossed an unimaginable line. The scandal ripped through Boston's elite circles like wildfire, but no one could have predicted what happened when grandfather returned home. Before I dive into this painful family story, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Please like and subscribe if family drama and justice served makes your day a little brighter. Growing up as a Coleman meant never questioning privilege. Our family estate sprawled across 20 acres in Wellesley, Massachusetts, a Georgian mansion with 14 bedrooms, an indoor pool, private movie theater, and separate guest houses for staff quarters. This was just home base. We also maintained a penthouse overlooking Central Park, a beachfront property in the Hamptons, a ski chalet in Aspen, and our summer villa in Tuscany. Private jets whisked us between properties like most people catch Ubers. Behind this empire stood my grandfather, Richard Coleman. Unlike many of America's elite, Richard wasn't born into wealth. As he loved reminding us, he grew up in a South Boston triple-decker, the son of a factory worker and seamstress. After putting himself through MIT in the early 1980s, he developed one of the first commercially successful security software systems as personal computers were becoming mainstream. His company, Secure Core Systems, revolutionized digital protection before most Americans even owned computers. I saw what was coming before others did, grandfather would tell me during our special dinners. The digital world needed security from day one, but nobody was thinking about it. That's where fortune favors foresight, Samantha. By contrast, my father, James Coleman, never worked a day in his life. Harvard-educated on his father's dime, he married my mother Elizabeth, a former model from Connecticut, and slid into the role of professional rich person. While holding the title of Vice President of Strategic Development at Secure Core, his actual job consisted of attending charity galas, playing golf, and complaining about his father's continued control of the company. Mother wasn't much different. Her days filled with shopping, spa appointments, charity board meetings, where she did no work but loved the recognition, and social events where she could showcase her designer wardrobe and surgically enhanced features. My parents lived as decorative fixtures in the Coleman legacy, contributing nothing but spending in abundance. I never fit their mold. From childhood, I gravitated toward grandfather. While my parents dragged me to cotillions and sailing lessons, I'd escape to his study where he taught me about art, history, and business. He noticed my eye for aesthetics and encouraged my education in art history and museum studies. With his support, I became a curator at Boston's Museum of Fine Arts, insisting on building my own career despite the trust fund that made work optional. "You remind me of me, Samantha," he once said. Not satisfied with what's given. Needing to build something of your own. It was the highest compliment he could give. By last summer, grandfather had reached 80. Though his mind remained sharp for business, we'd noticed concerning lapses in his day-to-day memory. He'd repeat stories, forget appointments, and sometimes become momentarily confused about where he was. The family ignored these warning signs, treating them as normal aging rather than consulting specialists. Father's resentment grew as grandfather maintained firm control of Secure Core and the family fortune. Despite being in his 50s, Dad was still treated like an incompetent son rather than a successor. Their board meeting arguments became legendary among executives. "You haven't earned the right to lead," grandfather would declare publicly. "Leadership comes from innovation and understanding the business from the ground up." Father would counter, "Times have changed, Dad. You're becoming a liability with your outdated thinking and these memory issues everyone's noticing." These confrontations escalated in the months before our annual summer trip to Tuscany. Grandfather threatened to change his will if father didn't start taking genuine responsibility in the company. Father made secret calls to lawyers about options for wresting control based on grandfather's cognitive decline. I stood in the middle, loving my grandfather, but failing to fully acknowledge his deterioration, resenting my father's entitlement, but not yet recognizing how dangerous it had become. Our family dynamics teetered on a precipice as we boarded the private jet for Italy, though none of us realized how steep the fall would be. The Coleman jet touched down at a private airfield near Florence on a perfect June morning. Father had already consumed 3 scotches despite the early hour. Mother had spent the flight reviewing social calendars with her assistant, and I sat with grandfather looking through an art book about Renaissance masters whose works we planned to visit. "I can't wait to show you the Brunelleschi exhibition," I told him, noticing how his eyes lit up at the mention of architecture. "And Signor Bianchi invited us to his new gallery opening." "Bianchi?" Grandfather frowned. "Don't think I know him." I gently reminded him, "Your friend Roberto's son. We visited his first gallery last summer. You bought the Caravaggio-inspired piece for your study." Right, he nodded, though his eyes betrayed confusion. This momentary lapse would typically dissolve quickly, but these incidents had been increasing in frequency. Our Tuscan villa sat perched on a hillside surrounded by cypress trees and vineyards, a 16th-century estate renovated with modern luxuries while maintaining its historical charm. A staff of 12 maintained the property year-round: groundskeepers, housekeepers, a chef, a sommelier, and a property manager who coordinated everything from restaurant reservations to helicopter tours. Upon arrival, Mother immediately began planning her social calendar with the wives of Italian fashion executives and European aristocrats who summered nearby. Father retreated to the pool with his tablet, ostensibly reviewing company reports, but actually checking stock prices and texting friends about their upcoming yacht excursion. Grandfather seemed particularly excited about this trip. "Got to visit Giovanni at his new vineyard," he told me repeatedly. "Been friends since the 70s when he was just starting out. Want to see what he's done with the property." The problem: Giovanni had sold his vineyard 3 years ago and moved to Rome. When I gently reminded grandfather, he became agitated. No, I just spoke with him last week. He's expecting us tomorrow." Later that evening, during dinner on the terrace overlooking the sunset-drenched valleys, grandfather struggled with the wine list, forgetting his favorite Brunello that he'd ordered every summer for decades. "Just pick something, Dad," Father snapped when the sommelier stood awkwardly waiting. "You're holding up dinner for everyone." "James," Mother hissed, glancing nervously at the staff. "What?" "He's being ridiculous. He's ordered the same wine for 20 years and suddenly can't remember." Grandfather's face flushed with embarrassment. "I'm just considering trying something different." "Sure you are," Father muttered, grabbing the list and ordering himself. The tension escalated when grandfather accidentally knocked over his water glass, soaking the tablecloth. Father's disgust was plainly visible. "Maybe you should eat in your room if you can't manage a proper dinner," he suggested, not bothering to disguise his contempt. I intervened, helping dab the spill and changing the subject to an exhibit I'd visited at the Uffizi that afternoon. But the damage was done. Grandfather retreated into silence, his dignity wounded. That night, I heard raised voices from grandfather's study. Approaching quietly, I listened through the cracked door. "The board is concerned, Dad," Father was saying. "Your episodes are becoming obvious. Thompson called me directly after you couldn't remember the Jensen acquisition during the quarterly meeting." "Those vultures have been waiting for me to slip," grandfather retorted. "One forgotten detail, and they're ready to push me out of my own company." "It's not just one detail. It's happening regularly. The responsible thing would be to step down gracefully. Let me take over while you can still do it on your own terms." Grandfather's laugh was bitter. "You think I'd hand Secure Corps to someone who's never created anything? Who sees my life's work as nothing but his inheritance? I'm your son. Who else would you leave it to? Maybe someone who's earned it." I've watched Samantha build her career from nothing. She has the Coleman drive, not you. The silence that followed felt dangerous. When Father finally spoke, his voice had dropped to a controlled, icy tone. "You give my birthright to her? A girl who wastes her time with paintings while I've waited decades for my turn. That's exactly why you don't deserve it, James. You've been waiting instead of working. Expecting instead of earning." I backed away quietly, heart pounding. The naked hatred in my father's voice had frightened me. That night, I called my boyfriend Mark in Boston and shared my concerns. I'm worried about grandfather. Dad seems determined to push him out, and the memory issues are getting worse. Maybe you should bring him to a doctor there? Or cut the trip short and come home. Mark suggested. I'll try talking to Mother tomorrow, I promised. She might see reason. But Mother, as usual, minimized everything. Your father and grandfather have always been like this, she dismissed over morning coffee. Richard pushes, James pushes back. It's their dynamic. This feels different. Dad seems truly angry and grandfather is vulnerable right now. Don't be dramatic, Samantha. Your grandfather is worth billions and runs a global company. He's hardly vulnerable. How catastrophically wrong she was. The next morning, Father announced he was taking grandfather to visit an old friend's vineyard. Giovanni invited us for a private tasting, he explained over breakfast. Just father and son. Grandfather brightened immediately. Giovanni. Wonderful. Been looking forward to seeing the new property. I frowned, setting down my espresso. Isn't Giovanni in Rome now? Different Giovanni, Father replied smoothly. Dad's friend from the technology conference last year. Remember, Dad? The one developing agricultural software. Grandfather nodded vaguely. Of course, of course. Something felt off, but I was scheduled for a video conference with my museum colleagues about an upcoming exhibition. I wish I could join you, I said reluctantly. No need. Men's day out, Father insisted. We'll be back for dinner. I watched from my laptop as they drove away in our rented Maserati, Father behind the wheel, grandfather in the passenger seat. The video call consumed the next 3 hours, and afterward, I spent the afternoon visiting a private collection in Florence. It wasn't until I returned to the villa around 6 that evening that I realized something was wrong. Aren't they back yet? I asked Maria, our housekeeper. No, Signorina Coleman. No call either. Dinner time came and went. Mother wasn't concerned, having drinks with the Vandermeer sisters at their estate. They probably found some charming restaurant and lost track of time, she said when I called her. You know how your grandfather gets nostalgic in Italy. By 9 o'clock, I called Father's cell phone repeatedly, each call going straight to voicemail. At 10, I was genuinely worried. Finally, just before 11, the Maserati pulled into the driveway. Father emerged alone. Where's grandfather? I demanded, running out to the car. Father looked surprised by my concern. He's staying with his friend. We had such a good time, he decided to spend the night. Which friend? Where? Why didn't you call? The cell reception was terrible out there. Middle of nowhere. Some vineyard near Montepulciano. He waved dismissively. Giovanni's sending a driver to bring him back tomorrow. Dad insisted. You know how stubborn he gets. Something in his too casual tone set off alarm bells. Let me talk to him. I'll call the vineyard. Don't have the number. It's fine, Samantha. Dad's a grown man enjoying time with an old friend. Stop hovering. I didn't sleep that night. Every instinct told me something was deeply wrong. When I checked grandfather's room the next morning, I discovered his medication still in the bathroom cabinet, daily heart medication, and pills for his cholesterol that he never traveled without. With mounting dread, I confronted Father at breakfast. Grandfather's medication is still here. He'd never stay overnight somewhere without it. Father's coffee cup paused midway to his lips. A flicker of something, panic, crossed his face before he regained composure. He must have a spare set. He mentioned keeping duplicates after that mix-up in New York last year. I need the address where he's staying. I told you I don't have it. Some remote vineyard. Giovanni will drive him back today. By noon, with no sign of grandfather and Father suspiciously disappearing for a golf game, I called the local police. The officer who took my report seemed unconcerned until I mentioned Richard Coleman's name and net worth. Suddenly, finding an elderly American billionaire became priority one. What I didn't know then, what I wouldn't learn until later, was the horrifying truth of what had happened the previous day. According to statements later given by witnesses, Father had driven grandfather to a small, remote village outside the tourist areas. He'd taken him to a cafe in the town square, ordered him an espresso, and then made an excuse about moving the car from a no-parking zone. "Wait here, Dad. I'll be right back," he'd said. And then he'd driven away, taking with him grandfather's phone, wallet, and medication. The cafe owner, Signora Belli, would later testify that the elderly American man sat for over an hour, becoming increasingly agitated as he waited for his son's return. When she brought the check, he searched his pockets, finding nothing. "My son has my wallet," he explained in broken Italian. "He will return soon." 3 hours later, as the cafe prepared to close for afternoon riposo, grandfather still sat waiting, confusion evident on his face. When Signora Belli approached again, he couldn't recall his son's phone number, the name of where they were staying, or even the nearby town. "Villa, near Florence," was all he could say. In a region with thousands of villas, this was hopelessly vague. As evening approached, grandfather wandered the village, asking anyone who spoke English for help. With the cognitive impacts of missed medication, stress, and his underlying condition, his ability to communicate deteriorated by the hour. Night fell. The temperature dropped. A wealthy American accustomed to luxury found himself homeless on the streets of a foreign village where no one knew him. Meanwhile, father returned to our villa, fabricated his story about Giovanni, and went to bed knowing exactly what he'd done. By the time I involved the police, grandfather had been missing for nearly 24 hours. The initial response from the Italian authorities was polite but measured. Missing adults rarely warrant immediate concern, especially when a family member claims they're staying with friends. Everything changed when I mentioned his medical condition and missed medication. "Signora, your grandfather, he has dementia," Captain Ricci of the Carabinieri asked, suddenly alert. "Early stages, undiagnosed, but yes. And heart medication he can't miss." And this is Richard Coleman, the technology billionaire. When I confirmed, the machinery of a full search operation clicked into place. Within hours, police units from multiple jurisdictions were involved. Father maintained his fiction about Giovanni's vineyard, even as mother finally grasped the seriousness of the situation and returned from her social engagements. "This is becoming embarrassing, James," she hissed during a police interview. "The Contessa just texted asking why helicopters are searching for my father-in-law. He's probably just wandered off from Giovanni's. You know how confused he gets lately," father insisted, sticking to his story despite the mounting evidence that Giovanni didn't exist. By evening, media outlets had picked up the story. Tech billionaire Richard Coleman missing in Italy made international headlines. Our villa became surrounded by journalists, and father was forced into the role of worried son for the cameras. "We're working closely with Italian authorities to find my father," he announced with practiced concern. "Our family is deeply grateful for their efforts and prayers during this difficult time." Behind closed doors, he maintained remarkable composure, even as mother fretted about their social calendar and the embarrassment of canceling dinner with European royalty. "This is a disaster," she complained. "The Duchess of Wellington specifically arranged her schedule to meet us tomorrow." "For God's sake, Elizabeth," I snapped. "Your father-in-law could be dead, and you're worried about missing tea with some tiara-wearing socialite." As the search expanded, I remembered the family tracking app grandfather had insisted we all install years ago, ironically for safety. Father had claimed his phone was dead the previous day, but the app stored location history. While he showered, I checked his phone, finding a clear record of his drive to a tiny village called Monteleone, nearly 2 hours from our villa. When confronted with this evidence, father's story evolved. Fine, it wasn't Giovanni's vineyard. Dad wanted to see this obscure medieval town. We argued when I wanted to leave, so I left him at a cafe to cool off. He must have wandered off. I went back later and couldn't find him, so I assumed he'd gotten a ride back with someone. You left an 80-year-old man with cognitive issues alone in a strange town without his phone, wallet, or medication. I was shaking with rage. And then lied about it for a full day while search teams looked everywhere but there. Father's face hardened. "Don't be dramatic. He's been embarrassing himself for months. I thought a little independence might snap him out of this helpless act." I slapped him. The sound echoed through the room like a gunshot. Mother gasped. "Samantha." "I'm taking the police to Monteleone," I said, my voice deadly calm. "Pray we find him alive, because if we don't, I promise you'll spend the rest of your life in prison." The drive to Monteleone with Captain Ricci and 2 officers took 90 agonizing minutes along winding mountain roads. I described grandfather's condition, his medications, and the devastating impact their absence might have after 36 hours. "My colleague has already spoken with cafe owners in the main square," Ricci explained. "A Signora Belli remembers an elderly American who could not pay his bill. She gave him food and water, but he left before dark." The village was tiny, barely 300 residents, but surrounded by miles of forests, olive groves, and vineyards. A confused elderly man could have walked in any direction. "We have search dogs coming," Ricci assured me. "And the helicopter has thermal imaging." As teams combed the hills and valleys around Monteleone, I went from business to business in the village, showing grandfather's photo. Several people recognized him, each account more heartbreaking than the last. The pharmacist who couldn't understand what medicine he needed. The priest who offered him shelter at the church, only for grandfather to wander away, insisting he needed to find James. A teenager who tried helping with Google Translate, but grandfather couldn't remember our villa's name or location. As night fell again, the search continued with floodlights and dogs. I sat in the village square, where grandfather had last been definitively seen, and broke down sobbing. The proud, brilliant man who built an empire from nothing had been abandoned like unwanted baggage by his own son, my father, and now faced death alone in a foreign country. Captain Ricci sat beside me, offering his jacket against the evening chill. "We will find him, Signora Coleman." "What if we're too late?" He had no answer for that. Dawn broke over the Tuscan hills with no sign of grandfather. The search had continued through the night, with local volunteers joining police units and emergency services. Dogs had tracked his scent to the edge of an olive grove north of town before losing the trail. I hadn't slept, surviving on espresso and adrenaline as I coordinated with search teams and fielded calls from Secure Corps executives and family friends. Mother and father remained at the villa, father now under unofficial police surveillance to prevent any attempted departure from Italy. As morning light strengthened, a shout came from the radio on Captain Ricci's belt. "L'abbiamo trovato." "We found him." My heart stopped. "Is he?" Ricci listened intently, then gave me a cautious nod. "Alive. A farmer found him collapsed among the olive trees. The ambulance is going now." The next hour passed in a blur. A police vehicle rushed me along winding roads to the small regional hospital where grandfather had been taken. Walking through those sterile corridors, I prepared myself for the worst. Nothing could have prepared me for the sight of Richard Coleman, titan of industry, commanding presence in any room, looking small and frail against white hospital sheets. His normally immaculate appearance was replaced by a hospital gown, dirt-streaked face, and wild gray hair. And 4 delivered fluids to his dehydrated body. Monitors beeped, tracking his weakened heart. When his eyes fluttered open and found mine, tears spilled down my cheeks. "Samantha." His voice was a rasp. "I'm here, grandfather. You're safe now." His cracked lips trembled. "James left me." Those 3 words, spoken with such bewildered hurt, broke something inside me. This wasn't just elder abuse or abandonment, it was betrayal of the most fundamental kind. "I know. I'm so sorry." Couldn't remember where we were staying. Tried to find my way back. The attending doctor, a Dr. Rossi, pulled me aside while nurses attended to grandfather. "He is suffering from severe dehydration, missed medication, exposure, and exhaustion," she explained in accented English. "We found significant bruising from falls. His heartbeat is irregular from missing his medication, but we are stabilizing him. Will he recover?" Her expression turned grave. "Physically, yes, with time. But this level of stress and trauma at his age, with his cognitive condition." She hesitated. "We've done some preliminary assessments. Your grandfather is showing signs consistent with dementia, likely Alzheimer's. This experience has almost certainly accelerated his cognitive decline. The room seemed to tilt around me. He's never been formally diagnosed. It is clear from his disorientation and memory patterns. When he is stable, he should see specialists. But you should prepare for the possibility that he may not return to his previous level of cognitive function. As this devastating information sank in, the hospital room door burst open. A cameraman and reporter rushed in before security could stop them. "Mr. Coleman, how does it feel to be abandoned by your son? Is this revenge for family business disputes?" Security escorted them out, but the damage was done. The story was breaking internationally, not just as a missing person case, but as a scandalous family drama among the ultra-wealthy. Within hours, media presence outside the hospital grew from a handful of reporters to dozens. The Coleman family soap opera was too juicy to ignore. Billionaire tech founder abandoned by entitled son, left to die in foreign country, family fortune hanging in balance. Grandfather stabilized enough by evening to give a brief statement to police. His fragmented recollection provided chilling details of father's calculated cruelty. James said move the car, took my things to hold, said 5 minutes, never came back. Captain Ricci informed me they were opening a formal criminal investigation. Your father may face charges of elder abuse, endangerment, and abandonment under both Italian and American law. When father finally arrived at the hospital, only after his lawyer advised that failing to appear would look worse, his performance as the concerned son collapsed under grandfather's simple question. "Why, James?" Father stammered, "It was a misunderstanding. I came back and couldn't find you. You took my wallet, my phone, my pills." Each word came slowly, but with devastating clarity. "You left me to die." Security escorted father out as he protested. "That's ridiculous. I never intended. It was just supposed to be for an hour, a lesson about independence." Mother arrived separately, more concerned with press coverage than grandfather's condition. "We need better PR management. The stock is in freefall." As night fell again, I sat beside grandfather's bed while he slept, holding his weathered hand in mine. A hand that had built a tech empire, guided my education, and now felt frighteningly fragile. The beeping monitors and antiseptic smell faded as I made a silent promise. Whoever was responsible for this would face justice, even if it meant testifying against my own father. 3 days later, medical transport flew us back to Massachusetts. Grandfather had stabilized enough for travel, though doctors warned the journey would tax his fragile health. Every major news outlet covered our departure from Italy and arrival in Boston, where a motorcade of black SUVs whisked us from the private airfield to Massachusetts General Hospital for further evaluation. Father and mother traveled separately on a commercial flight, their access to the family jet revoked by emergency action from SecureCorp's board of directors. The company's stock had plummeted 15% since news broke of the Coleman family crisis, as CNBC branded it. The scandal exploded across international media with unexpected ferocity. While the ultra-wealthy typically managed to contain family dramas, the abandonment of a beloved business icon struck a universal nerve. Elder abuse transcended class boundaries. Everyone could imagine their own parent or grandparent vulnerable and abandoned. Grandfather's hospitalization in Boston revealed the full extent of the damage. Beyond the physical recovery from exposure and dehydration, neurological assessments confirmed what the Italian doctors suspected: early-stage Alzheimer's disease, significantly exacerbated by the trauma. The stress and disorientation accelerated the progression, Dr. Levin explained during our private consultation. Think of Alzheimer's as a slow-burning fire in the brain. Your grandfather experienced the neurological equivalent of pouring gasoline on that fire. Legal consequences mounted with stunning speed. Italian prosecutors filed criminal charges against father for elder abuse, endangerment, and abandonment. The U.S. Attorney's Office in Massachusetts opened its own investigation into elder abuse across state lines, potentially a federal crime. SecureCorp's board called an emergency session and voted unanimously to remove father from all positions within the company. The press release was brutally direct, James Coleman's recent actions demonstrate a severe lack of judgment and character incompatible with any role at Secure Core Systems. Effective immediately, he has been removed from all positions and responsibilities. Our family's social standing collapsed overnight. Invitations were rescinded. Charity boards requested mother's resignation. Country club members suddenly found their schedules too full for golf with James Coleman. Father retreated to their Manhattan penthouse, emerging only for meetings with his growing team of criminal defense attorneys and PR consultants. Mother oscillated between rage at the social humiliation and panic over their financial future, especially after grandfather instructed his attorneys to freeze father's access to family accounts pending legal proceedings. I took a leave of absence from the museum to become grandfather's full-time advocate. With his cognitive abilities fluctuating daily, he needed someone to manage his medical care, business affairs, and legal decisions. When the hospital recommended long-term care facilities, I instead arranged for him to move into my Cambridge apartment with round-the-clock nursing. Not putting me in some home, he insisted during a moment of lucidity. Coleman men don't retire. We die with our boots on. The investigation revealed father's actions were even more calculated than initially appeared. Security footage from Monteleone showed him deliberately taking grandfather's wallet and phone before driving away. Cell records proved he never returned to look for him, despite his claims. Most damning, emails recovered from his accounts revealed he'd consulted with attorneys about having grandfather declared mentally incompetent 2 months earlier. One email to his lawyer stated, "Need options to accelerate transition of control." The old man's slipping but won't admit it. Time for a changing of the guard, willing or not. When confronted with this evidence during a deposition, father's defense crumbled. His new strategy, crafted by crisis management experts, portrayed him as a son overwhelmed by his father's declining health who made a terrible error in judgment. "I just wanted him to see he needed help," he claimed in a carefully orchestrated 60 Minutes interview that fooled no one. "I never intended to leave him overnight." Things spiraled out of control. Mother filed for divorce 6 weeks after our return, her legal team working to secure her portion of assets before criminal penalties and civil lawsuits could claim them. Her parting words to me were typically self-centered. "I hope you're satisfied. Your grandfather always liked you best anyway." Meanwhile, grandfather experienced good days and bad. On good days, he helped me understand the business operations of Secure Core and his various investments. On bad days, he called me by my grandmother's name and asked repeatedly when we were returning to Boston, while sitting in his Boston apartment. But even through the fog of his condition, Richard Coleman remained formidable. During a video conference with the Secure Core board, he articulated his wishes with surprising clarity. "James is no longer my son in any meaningful sense. He abandoned me to die. Samantha will assume his ownership shares and board position effective immediately. I've instructed my attorneys to rewrite my will accordingly." When a board member gently questioned whether such dramatic changes were advisable given his health, grandfather fixed him with the same steely glare that had intimidated boardrooms for decades. "My memory may falter, Arthur, but my judgment remains intact. James proved himself unworthy. Samantha has stepped up. The decision is made." 3 months after Italy, federal prosecutors formally indicted father on charges of elder abuse, fraud, and attempted financial exploitation. The Italian case proceeded in parallel, with father's legal team fighting extradition. Civil lawsuits mounted from shareholders alleging his actions had deliberately damaged the company. Secure Core established the Coleman Elder Justice Initiative with a $50 million endowment dedicated to preventing elder abuse and supporting victims. It was grandfather's idea, turning personal tragedy into meaningful action. "Make something good from the bad," he told me during a rare moment of complete lucidity. That's always been the Coleman way. 6 months after Italy, our lives had transformed beyond recognition. Grandfather moved permanently into my Cambridge apartment, which we renovated to accommodate his needs while maintaining his dignity and independence. Rather than hiding his condition, we adapted to it, creating systems to support his fluctuating cognitive abilities. Smart home technology reminded him of appointments and medication schedules. Color-coded rooms reduced confusion. Photo albums with labeled pictures helped on days when names escaped him. A rotation of nurses provided medical support, but I remained his primary caregiver and advocate. Father's legal troubles mounted as he awaited trial. The criminal cases in 2 countries proceeded methodically, with his attorneys filing motion after motion to delay proceedings. The SEC launched an investigation into whether he had attempted to manipulate SecureCore stock through actions designed to incapacitate the company's founder. His assets frozen, Father was reduced to borrowing money from increasingly reluctant friends to fund his defense. Mother reinvented herself as a wronged woman, giving tearful interviews claiming she had no idea about James's plans and was heartbroken over Richard's condition. She retreated to a modest $3 million condo in Palm Beach, playing the role of dignified survivor while angling for sympathetic coverage in Town and Country and Vanity Fair. Meanwhile, I found myself thrust into a business world I'd never anticipated joining. As grandfather's designated successor, I assumed his board seat at SecureCore and began intensive education in the company's operations. My art history background and museum experience proved surprisingly relevant. Both required attention to detail, authentication of value, and presentation of complex ideas to diverse audiences. You understand worth beyond price, grandfather told me during a strategy session. That's something James never grasped. The company faced significant challenges in the wake of the scandal. Competitors circled, sensing vulnerability. Key clients needed reassurance about leadership stability. The stock price, though recovering, remained below pre-scandal levels. With grandfather's guidance on his good days and a team of loyal executives who respected his legacy, I implemented a strategic pivot. Rather than hiding the Coleman family drama, we incorporated its lessons into the company ethos. SecureCore would champion protection of the vulnerable in digital and physical spaces alike. The Elder Justice Initiative expanded into a major corporate social responsibility program. We launched new security products specifically designed for seniors and vulnerable populations. Each move reinforced the narrative that SecureCore was emerging stronger and more purpose-driven from its founder's personal tragedy. Industry analysts who initially predicted the company's demise began writing about the Coleman comeback. Harvard Business Review published a case study on crisis management using our response as a model. SecureCore stock not only recovered, but reached new highs as our strategy resonated with consumers increasingly concerned about digital vulnerability. Through it all, grandfather's condition continued its unpredictable course. Some weeks brought heartbreaking decline, moments when he couldn't recognize me or became agitated by phantom threats. Other periods granted us precious islands of clarity where the brilliant businessman emerged intact, if only briefly. During one such lucid interval, he made a decision that shocked me. "I want to see James," he announced over breakfast. "Are you sure that's wise?" I questioned, protective of his fragile emotional state. "Not about wisdom. About closure." His hands trembled slightly as he set down his coffee cup. "Need to look my son in the eye one last time." The meeting took place under careful conditions at grandfather's insistence, despite objections from both legal teams. Father arrived at my apartment looking diminished, designer suits replaced by off-the-rack clothing, the confident swagger gone from his walk. Dark circles underscored eyes that darted nervously around the familiar space now transformed to accommodate his father's condition. "You wanted to see me?" he asked, remaining standing when no one invited him to sit. Grandfather observed him silently for a long moment, his expression unreadable. When he finally spoke, his voice carried surprising strength. "I've been asking myself why. Not just Italy. Before that. Where did I fail you, James?" Father's composure cracked. "You didn't fail me. You just couldn't let go. Couldn't trust me. Always looking over my shoulder, always finding me wanting." "Perhaps," grandfather acknowledged. "Perhaps I saw too much of myself in Samantha and too little in you. That wasn't fair." Hope flickered across father's face. "I never meant for you to be hurt. It was stupid and cruel, but I just wanted to force my hand," grandfather finished. to create a situation where I'd have no choice but to step aside. He sighed, suddenly looking every one of his 80 years. I came to say I forgive you, James. Not for your sake, but for mine. I won't carry hatred through whatever time I have left. Father's eyes welled with tears. Dad, But forgiveness isn't forgetting, grandfather continued. Actions have consequences. You chose yours. Now live with them. With that, he signaled the meeting was over. Father left without another word, shoulders slumped in defeat. I never saw him cry before that day, nor ever again after. 2 weeks later, the criminal trial began. Despite high-priced attorneys arguing diminished capacity and temporary insanity, the evidence proved overwhelming. Father was convicted on all counts and sentenced to 8 years in federal prison. The Italian courts added 5 more years to be served consecutively, though ongoing appeals made extradition uncertain. As Father began his sentence at a minimum security facility in Pennsylvania, an unexpected transformation took place within Secure Corp. Under my leadership, guided by grandfather's wisdom and institutional knowledge from longtime executives, the company flourished. Our hybrid approach blended Richard's old-school business fundamentals with my fresh perspective on corporate responsibility and ethical technology. Quarterly results exceeded projections for 3 consecutive periods. Industry publications that once questioned a museum curator's ability to lead a tech giant now praised the cultural renaissance at Secure Corp. Most importantly, our security products protected more vulnerable users than ever before, creating genuine social impact alongside shareholder value. 1 year after the Italy incident, grandfather experienced another moment of perfect clarity during a board meeting. As executives presented the latest quarterly results, he suddenly straightened in his wheelchair and raised his hand. I'd like to say something. The room fell silent. A year ago, I thought I'd lost everything: my health, my dignity, my legacy. His voice, though softer than in his prime, commanded attention as it always had. Instead, I found what matters. Not wealth, not power, but purpose and people who stand by you when it counts. He reached for my hand. Secure Corp was built to protect what's valuable. Samantha reminded us that people are what's most valuable of all. He looked around the boardroom, making eye contact with each person. Remember that, and this company will outlive us all. It was his last board meeting. Though he would remain with us for another year, that day marked his conscious farewell to the business world he had helped shape for 4 decades. On the 1-year anniversary of what we now simply called Italy, we held a private ceremony at the Coleman estate in Wellesley. Not a celebration, nothing about our family's journey warranted champagne, but a reflective gathering to acknowledge how far we'd come and honor what remained. Grandfather's condition had stabilized with proper treatment and reduced stress. Though the progression of Alzheimer's continued its inevitable course, the dramatic decline initially triggered by trauma had slowed. He lived primarily in my Cambridge home, but enjoyed weekly visits to the estate where he'd built his life, carefully supervised by medical staff. Father's appeal had been denied 3 months earlier, confirming he would serve his full sentence. Prison rehabilitation programs provided structure, and his counselor reported genuine introspection beginning to emerge from beneath layers of entitlement. Whether this represented true change or strategic behavior for a future parole board remained uncertain. Either way, justice had been served through legal channels rather than vengeance. Mother had reimagined herself yet again, this time as an advocate for women rebuilding after family trauma. Her carefully curated Instagram showed tasteful charity galas and wellness retreats, though her calls to grandfather dwindled as his ability to manage financial matters decreased. When the divorce finalized with a settlement far smaller than she'd hoped, her attention turned to a retired hedge fund manager in Palm Beach. As for me, Samantha Coleman, reluctant business leader, I found unexpected purpose in my new role. While maintaining my passion for art through serving on museum boards, I discovered genuine satisfaction in leading Secure Corp's evolution. The skills that made me an effective curator translated remarkably well to corporate leadership, authenticating value, preserving legacy, and making complex ideas accessible to diverse audiences. The Coleman Elder Justice Initiative had grown into the nation's largest private foundation dedicated to preventing elder abuse and supporting victims. Our advocacy helped pass strengthened elder protection legislation in 17 states. The Foundation's annual conference brought together medical professionals, legal experts, and caregivers to share best practices for supporting vulnerable seniors. On that anniversary morning, Grandfather and I sat on the estate's terrace overlooking gardens blooming with summer flowers. His good days still came, though less frequently. "Do you remember Italy?" I asked gently, unsure if this particular memory remained intact. He nodded slowly. James leaving me at the cafe. Not finding my way back. His fingers trembled slightly around his teacup. Scared. So scared. "I'm sorry we didn't find you sooner. Found me when it mattered." He patted my hand. "Always knew you would." The conversation drifted, as it often did, between present concerns and distant memories. He recalled business triumphs from decades past with perfect clarity, while questioning if he'd taken his morning medication moments after swallowing the pills. Through it all, his essential character, his fundamental Richardness, remained intact despite the disease eroding his cognitive function. That afternoon, we held a small ceremony dedicating the newly established Richard Coleman Center for Cognitive Health at Massachusetts General Hospital, funded by a $100 million grant from SecureCorps. The center would combine research, treatment, and family support services for those affected by Alzheimer's and related conditions. As Grandfather cut the ceremonial ribbon with slightly shaking hands, I reflected on the painful journey that had brought us here. A single act of cruelty had rippled outward, transforming not only our family, but creating unexpected positive change for countless others who would benefit from the center's work. Later that evening, as summer twilight lingered over the estate gardens, Grandfather surprised me with unusual clarity. "Want to go back to Italy?" he announced as we finished dinner. I nearly choked on my wine. "Italy? Are you sure?" "Not the same village," he clarified. "Florence, Venice, Rome, places with good memories." His eyes, though clouded by disease, held determination. "Won't let one bad chapter erase the good ones." 2 months later, we did exactly that, a carefully planned journey with medical support and familiar surroundings at every stop. We visited the Uffizi Gallery in Florence, where Grandfather recalled with perfect precision the first Renaissance painting that captured his imagination during a college backpacking trip. In Venice, we rode gondolas and ate gelato, creating photographs to add to his memory books. In Rome, he insisted on climbing the Spanish Steps, leaning heavily on my arm but refusing to stop until he reached the top. "Life knocks you down," he panted at the summit, gazing over the eternal city. "Get back up while you still can." Those words became my mantra in the years that followed, through challenges and triumphs neither of us could have anticipated. When Grandfather finally passed peacefully 3 years after Italy, I honored his wishes with a simple service focused not on what was lost, but what had been created through his life and legacy. Father, granted compassionate release to attend the funeral under guard, approached me afterward, his prison-issued clothing stark against the formal attire of other mourners. "He was a great man," he said simply. "I never measured up." "No," I agreed. "You chose not to." "And you?" I considered the question carefully. "I'm not trying to measure up to him. I'm trying to be worthy of what he entrusted to me." A year later, I received a letter from Father's counselor. James Coleman Sr. had completed restorative justice training and wanted to volunteer with elderly inmates upon his eventual release. The program director noted his particular empathy for those suffering cognitive decline while incarcerated. Whether this represented genuine redemption or calculated rehabilitation remained between Father and his conscience. 5 years after Italy, SecureCorps' market value had doubled under my leadership. The Coleman Elder Justice Initiative had helped change laws protecting seniors in all 50 states. The Richard Coleman Center pioneered breakthrough research in early Alzheimer's intervention. None of this erased the tragedy that sparked these changes, but something meaningful had grown from terrible beginnings. In quiet moments, I still return to Grandfather's words on those Spanish steps, "Life knocks you down. Get back up while you still can. These words apply not just to individuals, but to families, organizations, and communities. When the unthinkable happens, the true measure of character lies not in avoiding the fall, but in how we choose to rise again. What unexpected lessons have you learned from family challenges? Have you witnessed betrayal transform into growth? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this journey of accountability, forgiveness, and transformation touched you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need these lessons today. Thank you for joining me in honoring my grandfather's legacy by sharing these difficult truths.